Before you assume a woman cheats because her partner isn't good enough, understand this. Many women betray good men not out of malice, but because of deep psychological patterns they don't even recognize. Today, I'm breaking down 3 powerful mind-level reasons why this happens, reasons most people never talk about, but every man and woman needs to hear. Many women who cheat on good men do not do it because they lack love, appreciation, or respect for their partner. Often the root cause lies in an emotional validation deficit that has been silently growing within the relationship. Emotional validation is not about compliments or romantic gestures alone. It is about feeling deeply understood, acknowledged, and emotionally connected. When this core emotional need becomes compromised, even unintentionally, the woman may begin to feel unseen or emotionally disconnected, creating psychological vulnerability that she herself may not fully comprehend. In many relationships, especially long-term ones, partners create routines that are comfortable but emotionally stagnant. A man may genuinely believe he is doing everything right, being loyal, responsible, supportive, and stable, but emotional validation operates on a different level. It revolves around emotional presence rather than practical effort. A woman may begin to crave emotional engagement, deeper conversations, or consistent affection. When these needs go unmet, not out of neglect but due to emotional disconnect or communication gaps, she starts experiencing an internal emotional drought. This emotional drought is often subtle. It does not appear suddenly or dramatically. It builds up gradually through small unmet needs, moments where she feels unheard, times she feels emotionally alone even while physically present with her partner, or situations where she suppresses her feelings because she assumes they will be dismissed or misunderstood. Over time, these moments accumulate, forming an emotional vacuum. Emotional validation then becomes something she seeks unconsciously, not as an act of betrayal, but as an attempt to feel understood or valued again. When someone outside the relationship offers attention, empathy, or emotionally attuned interaction, it can create a powerful psychological shift. This person may simply listen, show interest, or engage in emotionally charged dialogue. These exchanges activate what psychologists call microvalidations, small moments where she feels seen or valued. These microvalidations can become emotionally addictive because they feed a need she has been starving for. She may not be seeking physical connection at this stage. She is seeking emotional nourishment. The emotional attention feels refreshing, comforting, and reaffirming, even when she knows it shouldn't. It's also important to understand that emotional validation deficits often occur without the man realizing it. He may believe the relationship is stable and assume his contributions, financial security, loyalty, partnership duties are enough. However, emotional needs operate independently from practical contributions. A woman can feel grateful for everything her partner does, yet still feel emotionally distant from him. When this distance goes unaddressed, emotional vulnerability grows. That vulnerability makes her more receptive to emotional cues from others, even those she normally would never consider as potential romantic interests. This is where emotional affairs typically begin. Emotional affairs are rarely intentional. They begin with harmless conversations, shared frustrations, mutual understanding, or emotional support. Over time, the emotional bond grows stronger, creating a sense of intimacy that she may not be experiencing in her primary relationship. The emotional connection becomes a psychological refuge. She starts looking forward to the attention, the understanding tone, or the emotional responsiveness she receives from the other person. This emotional attachment becomes the precursor to physical infidelity. It's also worth noting that many women do not cheat because they want a new partner. They cheat because they want to feel emotionally alive again. Emotional validation has a direct impact on self-esteem, identity, and emotional stability. When emotional needs remain suppressed for too long, the desire for validation becomes overwhelming. This need can overshadow logic, morality, and loyalty. The affair becomes a temporary coping mechanism rather than a pursuit of a better relationship. Understanding emotional validation deficits does not justify cheating, but it explains how good men can be blindsided despite giving their best. One of the most overlooked reasons women cheat on good men is the presence of an identity crisis combined with unresolved emotional trauma. These internal struggles often have very little to do with the partner or the relationship itself. Instead, they originate from psychological wounds that were never fully addressed. When a woman carries emotional baggage from her past, whether it stems from childhood abandonment, unstable family dynamics, past heartbreaks, or inconsistent emotional nurturing, it can significantly shape the way she understands love, security, and attachment. Even when she is with a supportive and caring partner, these unresolved issues can resurface and create instability within her. Many women who face unresolved trauma develop an internal conflict between who they are and who they feel they are supposed to be. They may appear confident, composed, or emotionally mature on the surface, but internally they struggle with feelings of inadequacy, fear, or emotional emptiness. Trauma often alters self-perception. A woman who has been hurt before may subconsciously believe she is not deserving of consistent love. Paradoxically, this belief can lead her to sabotage stable relationships, not because she wants chaos, but because chaos feels familiar. Her nervous system is conditioned to associate unpredictability or emotional highs and lows with connection, so a calm, good man may feel emotionally unfamiliar or even unsettling. Identity crises also emerge when a woman hasn't developed a strong sense of self. If her identity was shaped around pleasing others, seeking external approval, or conforming to expectations, she may not fully understand her own emotional needs or boundaries. When someone new enters her life and offers attention that makes her feel special or valued, it can create an emotional awakening. This attention may feel like a rediscovery of self-worth. It doesn't necessarily reflect dissatisfaction with her partner. Instead, it highlights a disconnect between her true self and the identity she has been maintaining. This internal confusion can make her more susceptible to external validation, especially when it activates emotions she has long suppressed. Unresolved trauma often plays out through attachment patterns. A woman who has experienced emotional neglect or inconsistent affection in her past may develop an anxious attachment style. This means she needs reassurance, closeness, and emotional intensity to feel secure. When the relationship becomes steady or predictable, she may interpret it as emotional distance, even when her partner is fully present. Someone outside the relationship who provides intense emotional engagement can trigger a sense of connection that feels more satisfying to her trauma-conditioned mind. It becomes less about the person and more about the emotional familiarity they awaken. For some women, cheating becomes a way to escape from uncomfortable emotions that arise within a stable relationship. Stability can bring unresolved trauma to the surface. A good man's consistency can feel foreign if she grew up with emotional instability. The safety he provides may force her to confront internal wounds she has avoided. Instead of addressing those wounds, she may gravitate toward a situation that distracts her from them or recreates dynamics she is more accustomed to. Infidelity in this case becomes less about desire and more about avoiding emotional discomfort tied to her past. Additionally, identity crises often intensify during major life transitions such as career changes, motherhood, aging, or shifts in personal goals. These transitions can challenge her sense of purpose or self-worth. If she feels disconnected from herself, she may seek external sources of affirmation to regain a sense of identity. Someone who shows admiration or expresses interest can temporarily fill that void, offering her a sense of significance she feels she has lost. This external validation acts as a bandage for deeper insecurities, even though it complicates her emotional world. When trauma remains unhealed, it also affects decision-making and self-regulation. A woman may struggle to recognize when emotional boundaries are being crossed or underestimate the consequences of emotional entanglements. She may rationalize her actions as harmless or convince herself that she deserves the attention because of her past struggles. This internal justification stems from unresolved pain rather than intentional betrayal. Low internal boundaries are one of the most common psychological reasons women cheat on good men, yet it is rarely discussed openly. Many people assume cheating begins with a conscious decision, but in reality, it often begins much earlier, long before the physical act. It begins with weak emotional boundaries, unclear personal limits, and an inability to recognize where friendliness ends and emotional intimacy begins. A woman may not intend to cheat or even consider the possibility, but when she lacks strong internal boundaries, she becomes vulnerable to emotional entanglements that gradually evolve into something more complicated. Internal boundaries are not about controlling attraction or avoiding the opposite gender altogether. They're about understanding one's emotional limits, recognizing emotional risks, and being aware of how certain interactions impact one's feelings. A woman with weak internal boundaries may not notice when she starts sharing personal details with someone outside her relationship. She may view it as harmless conversation, unaware that emotional disclosure is the first step toward emotional attachment. Because she does not monitor the depth of these conversations, she unconsciously allows another person to step into a space that should be reserved for her partner. It often starts very subtly. She may enjoy the attention someone gives her, especially if she feels unappreciated or unnoticed in her relationship. She may begin responding to messages with more interest, sharing more about her thoughts and feelings, or engaging in conversations that she wouldn't be comfortable discussing if her partner were present. These small steps feel innocent, but they create micro openings that allow emotional intimacy to grow. Over time, these interactions become her emotional outlet, something she looks forward to, something that brings excitement or comfort. Because her boundaries are not clearly defined, she doesn't realize she is slowly shifting emotional loyalty away from her partner. Another aspect of low internal boundaries is difficulty saying no or setting limits. A woman who struggles with assertiveness may not know how to distance herself when someone shows romantic interest. Instead of firmly communicating that she is committed and not interested, she may continue the interaction because she doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings or create conflict. This avoidance can lead to mixed signals, which then lead to deeper emotional entanglements. She may tell herself she is only being polite or friendly, but in reality, she is blurring the emotional line without acknowledging the consequences. Some women with low boundaries also rely heavily on external validation. When someone outside the relationship compliments them, shows interest, or pays attention, it may trigger a strong emotional response. Validation feels rewarding, and if she lacks internal boundaries, she may start seeking it subconsciously. The attention becomes a source of emotional comfort or self-esteem boost. This dynamic makes her more susceptible to forming emotional attachments because she begins relying on external sources to feel valued or desired. As the emotional attachment deepens, the relationship with the other person shifts from harmless interaction to emotional dependency. Another important factor is the lack of awareness regarding emotional cues. Women with low internal boundaries may not recognize when a conversation becomes flirtatious, when emotional intimacy becomes unhealthy, or when someone is attempting to cross a line. Instead, they interpret these interactions through a lens of friendliness or curiosity. This lack of awareness leaves them unprepared to shut down inappropriate advances or protect the emotional boundaries of their relationship. Without recognizing these cues, the connection progresses until it becomes emotionally charged and difficult to withdraw from. Low internal boundaries also create a false sense of control. A woman may believe she can handle the emotional closeness, keep it under control, and maintain distance when needed. She convinces herself she knows her limits, but without clear internal boundaries, those limits are vague and easily influenced by emotions. She may not realize how deeply she has become attached until she is already emotionally invested. At that point, the emotional connection may feel meaningful or irreplaceable, even though it developed unintentionally. A lack of internal boundaries combined with poor self-awareness is one of the most psychologically significant reasons women cheat on good men. These two factors work together silently, creating an internal environment where emotional vulnerability increases without the woman fully realizing what is happening. Internal boundaries act like emotional guardrails, helping a person recognize when a situation or interaction begins to cross into unsafe emotional territory. When those boundaries are weak or poorly developed, a woman may unintentionally allow people into her emotional space too easily. Pair that with low self-awareness, meaning she doesn't fully understand her own triggers, emotional needs, or vulnerabilities, and the pathway toward infidelity becomes easier to slip into without conscious intention. Poor self-awareness plays a huge role in how relationships deteriorate internally. A woman who lacks self-awareness may not understand why she feels restless, dissatisfied, or disconnected in her relationship. Instead of identifying the root problem, whether it's emotional neglect, personal stress, unresolved trauma, or insecurities, she may misinterpret her feelings. She might assume she is simply not in love anymore, or that something external is missing when the real issue lies within her inner emotional world. Because she can't pinpoint the source of her emotional discomfort, she becomes more susceptible to outside emotional stimulation. Anyone who offers attention, empathy, or understanding becomes appealing, not because they are better than her partner, but because they activate emotional responses she hasn't examined or understood within herself. A lack of internal boundaries often begins with seemingly innocent behavior. Responding to a message, engaging in deeper conversations, sharing personal frustrations, or opening up about relationship struggles may feel harmless. But these actions gradually shift emotional dependency away from her partner. When boundaries are not firmly in place, it becomes easy for emotional intimacy to develop with someone else. She might justify it to herself. It's just a friend, or I'm only venting, or nothing is actually happening. These justifications occur because poor self-awareness prevents her from seeing the emotional progression for what it truly is. She doesn't recognize that emotional affairs almost always begin with small steps that feel safe. Another key component is difficulty identifying emotional motives. A woman with low self-awareness may misinterpret excitement for compatibility, attention for affection, or validation for emotional connection. She may feel energized by the attention from someone outside her relationship and interpret that energy as attraction or meaningful connection. In reality, she is responding to unmet emotional needs, unresolved issues, or suppressed feelings she hasn't confronted. Because she has not examined these internal dynamics, she becomes vulnerable to forming attachments based on emotional impulse rather than conscious intention. Women with poor self-awareness also struggle to regulate emotions effectively. When they feel frustrated, lonely, misunderstood, or emotionally unfulfilled, they may seek relief through external sources. Instead of communicating their needs to their partner or working through internal conflicts, they might turn to someone who feels easier to talk to. This emotional escape creates a false sense of comfort. It temporarily soothes emotional discomfort, but simultaneously deepens dependency on the outside connection. With weak internal boundaries, she continues feeding this connection until it becomes emotionally charged and difficult to detach from. Additionally, poor self-awareness often comes with a lack of accountability. A woman may not understand how her actions contribute to emotional closeness with someone else. She may blame her environment, circumstances, or even her partner without realizing she has been gradually nurturing a secondary emotional bond. Because she isn't consciously aware of the emotional shifts happening within her, she fails to recognize when she is crossing lines that endanger the integrity of her relationship. The combination of denial, rationalization, and emotional impulsivity creates a psychological landscape where cheating becomes a possibility, even though she never intended for it to happen. Women with low internal boundaries are also more influenced by external validation. Compliments, attention, emotional interest, or supportive conversations can feel disproportionately meaningful. Without self awareness, she doesn't recognize how these interactions feed her emotional vulnerabilities. She may begin seeking more of that validation without acknowledging the internal void she is attempting to fill. This external attention becomes emotionally addictive because it offers an easy escape from her internal discomfort or dissatisfaction. In relationships, the interplay between weak boundaries and low self-awareness quietly erodes loyalty. She may still care for her partner deeply, but because she doesn't understand her own emotional mechanisms or limits, she becomes susceptible to emotional drift. Interactions that should have remained neutral take on emotional significance. Conversations that were supposed to be friendly become intimate. Feelings that should have been acknowledged and addressed internally get redirected towards someone outside the relationship. A significant number of women cheat not because their partner is a bad person, but because they feel emotionally abandoned, unheard, or disconnected in the relationship. Emotional abandonment does not always look dramatic. It does not necessarily come from fights, disrespect, or neglect. Often it develops slowly through subtle patterns where a woman begins to feel that her emotions, needs, or concerns are no longer being acknowledged with the same depth or attention as before. Even when a man believes he is doing everything right, providing stability, loyalty, and support, she may still experience an emotional gap that gradually grows wider over time. Emotional disconnection often begins with communication breakdowns. A woman may try to share her feelings, express vulnerability, or talk about something that matters to her, but the response she receives may feel dismissive, rushed, or surface level. It may not be intentional. Sometimes men respond logically instead of emotionally, or they try to fix the problem instead of listening. To her, this can feel like her inner world is being overlooked. When emotional conversations repeatedly end with her feeling misunderstood or emotionally alone, she begins to internalize the belief that her emotions do not matter in the relationship. This emotional invalidation doesn't have to be extreme. Small comments like "you're overthinking," "it's not a big deal," or "why are you getting emotional" can slowly chip away at her sense of being emotionally supported. Over time, these moments accumulate and form a deeper emotional wound. She begins to feel that expressing her true feelings is useless or even burdensome. When emotional expression is shut down, emotional distance grows. She may still love her partner, but she no longer feels deeply connected to him. Emotional abandonment also emerges when a woman feels alone in life responsibilities or emotional labor. If she feels she is the only one initiating conversations, planning, nurturing the connection, or maintaining the emotional health of the relationship, she may start to experience emotional exhaustion. She may feel like the relationship is functioning but not emotionally alive. In this state, someone who shows genuine interest, listens attentively, or engages in meaningful conversation can suddenly feel emotionally refreshing. This person becomes a reminder of what emotional intimacy once felt like, or what she has been missing. In many cases, the emotional disconnection is not visible to the man because she continues to function normally. Women often adapt by becoming quieter, more self-reliant, or emotionally reserved. From the outside, she appears fine, but internally, she is experiencing an emotional void she doesn't know how to address. She may convince herself that her desires for emotional intimacy are unrealistic or too demanding. When she suppresses these emotions for too long, her emotional resilience weakens, making her more susceptible to the attention or empathy of someone who seems to understand her. When someone outside the relationship offers emotional curiosity, asking how she feels, listening without judgment, validating her emotions, she experiences a psychological relief. This relief feels powerful. It's not the person she becomes drawn to, it's the feeling of being understood. Emotional validation can be intoxicating when she has been deprived of it. She may begin looking forward to conversations, messages, or interactions because they fill the emotional gap she has been silently carrying. Another component of emotional abandonment is the loss of emotional attunement. Attunement is when two partners sense each other's feelings and respond in ways that create emotional closeness. When attunement fades, a woman may feel invisible within the relationship. She may feel that her partner no longer notices when she is upset, stressed, overwhelmed, or withdrawn. Without emotional attunement, she feels like she is going through life alongside her partner, not with him. This lack of shared emotional experience can create loneliness even in a committed relationship. Over time, this emotional loneliness shapes her perception of the relationship. She may begin feeling disconnected from her partner's inner world and equally disconnected from her own. This state of emotional isolation makes her more vulnerable to forming emotional bonds outside the relationship because those bonds offer the connection, empathy, and presence she has been craving. A powerful yet often misunderstood psychological truth is that many women cheat not because their partner is inadequate, but because they are experiencing an internal imbalance they have not addressed. Infidelity in these cases becomes a symptom of unresolved emotional issues rather than a reflection of the man's qualities or his contributions to the relationship. When a woman feels emotionally unstable, confused within herself, or disconnected from her own identity, the imbalance can distort her judgment, influence her decisions, and lead her toward choices that contradict her values. This inner conflict becomes the foundation upon which unhealthy attachments and infidelity can grow. Internal imbalance can take many forms. It may appear as emotional instability, stress, identity confusion, or a constant sense of dissatisfaction that has nothing to do with the relationship. When a woman does not understand the origin of her emotional turbulence, she may project her discomfort onto her relationship. She may start believing something is missing with her partner, even when the relationship is stable and nurturing. Instead of examining her internal state, she attributes her confusion to external factors. This misalignment between inner emotions and external reality creates a psychological vulnerability that opens the door to infidelity. Another part of this imbalance stems from the emotional voids she may be carrying unconsciously. These voids can originate from childhood patterns, past relationships, or long-term emotional suppression. A woman who has ignored her deeper emotional needs may begin feeling disconnected from herself. When someone outside the relationship triggers feelings of excitement, validation, or emotional awakening, it may feel like a reconnection with parts of herself she has lost. The attraction isn't always toward the person, rather it is toward the emotional experience the connection creates. This becomes dangerous when she uses external emotional stimulation to temporarily escape her internal imbalance. Women who cheat from a place of inner instability often struggle with emotional regulation. They may experience heightened emotional reactions, fluctuating desires, or inconsistent feelings that make them question their own identity. In such a state, impulsive decisions become more likely. Emotional impulses can overpower logic, values, and loyalty. If she feels disconnected from her own emotions or uncertain about her life direction, she becomes more susceptible to pursuing emotional intensity outside the relationship. This pursuit is not a conscious desire to betray her partner, but a psychological attempt to feel grounded, seen, or alive again. Internal imbalance also creates distorted perceptions of the relationship. A woman may interpret neutrality as indifference, comfort as stagnation, or routine as emptiness. She might feel restless without understanding why. When internal unrest is mistaken for relationship dissatisfaction, she may believe she needs something more exciting, more emotional, or more affirming to feel fulfilled. This misinterpretation pushes her closer to external connections that offer temporary emotional highs. These emotional highs feel like clarity or passion, but they are often just reactions to unresolved internal conflicts. The imbalance can also manifest in her self-worth. A woman who feels disconnected from her identity or struggles with self-esteem may become dependent on external validation. Compliments, attention, or interest from someone else can feel disproportionately meaningful because they momentarily soothe the internal discomfort she is carrying. This emotional relief can lead to attachment, even if she logically knows the relationship she shares with her partner is valuable. When a woman's internal world is unstable, she may search for emotional grounding in places where she feels momentarily valued or desired. Additionally, internal imbalance clouds emotional boundaries. She may not recognize when interactions are becoming emotionally intimate or when emotional loyalty is shifting. She may underestimate the impact of her decisions or fail to see the emotional risks in maintaining close connections outside the relationship. This lack of emotional clarity leads her further down a path where infidelity becomes possible, not because her partner has failed her, but because she has failed to address her internal emotional landscape. In relationships, this dynamic creates confusion for the man, who often cannot understand how his loyalty, effort, and goodness were not enough. But the psychological truth remains: when a woman is emotionally imbalanced within herself, even the most stable and supportive partner cannot fill the void she has not acknowledged.